So is it a shakeup or is it a purge? All these words getting thrown around there today about the transition process. The vice president-elect, Mike Pence, taking over that process. He was seen arriving yesterday at Trump Tower. It's fascinating watching the comings and goings in the elevator these days. So we welcome you to Hour 2 now of America's Newsroom. What's today? I can't figure out what day it is anymore. It's Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
happy Wednesday.
A place to hang out in New York, isn't
it is. And then there's stores and everything on the first floor. So there's all this normal commerce going on, but it's impossible to get in and out of the building. So go figure. I'm Martha McCallum.
I'm Bill Hammer. Good morning. Mr. Trump pushing back against reports of chaos, calling it all part of an organized process well under control, he insists. Pence banning lobbyists from that transition team, making good on a campaign promise to, quote, drain the swamp.
Chris Direwalt, Fox News digital politics editor, joins us. Good morning. It must be boring there in Washington because everything's happening here, Chris.
They are starting to descend. Every 4 or 8 years, the transitioners, like cicadas, emerge here in Washington, D.C. and cover thick on the ground. Because remember, what's going on in New York are the top tier, cabinet level people that are coming and auditioning for jobs. I like Ted Cruz yesterday, like, oh, hey, bro, I just happened to be in New York and thought I would stop by if you had a spare Supreme Court appointment. Here in Washington, though, are the other 4,000 or so human beings, or the people who are auditioning to be the 4,000 or so human beings who are going to populate the top echelon of the federal government under President Trump.
So how do you think it's going?
I think that nobody knows, and I think that much of the conjecture about it is hogwash. It's unnecessary. There is something to the argument that part of an effective transition and part of an effective administration. The news media is interesting. We demand to be lied to constantly. And if you're not lying to us the way we like, we will get grouchy. So and I thought it was interesting, New York Times talking about there's not a narrative. There should be a story. This administration-elect should be pushing a story. Well, come on. You're grown-ups. You can come up with whatever story you want. Now, the danger for the Trump transition, the stories that they come up with are chaos, disaster, explosion, implosion, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, you can see that they're coming up with stories with regard to Rudy Giuliani because his name is being floated for very high-level positions, potentially for Secretary of State. And there's a big story this morning about what they see as conflicts of interest, and they're trying to draw parallels between his behavior and Hillary Clinton. What do you think about that?
Rudy Giuliani has led a rich and varied life and has had a long career. That makes it complicated. And being Secretary of State, as Hillary Clinton demonstrated, brings you in contact with a lot of people. Now, Rudy Giuliani has done business all around the world. The firm that he was part of that dealt in influence, dealt in regulatory issues, dealt in those things around the world, makes it more complicated. That's why very often the people who get appointments like that are the people who have been in foreign service, have been in positions like that. But remember this, in the end, the president probably gets his way on appointments. As soon as he takes the oath of office, he's got a Republican majority in the Senate, and provided that things haven't already hit an absolute nadir of relations, he is likely to get the lion's share of his cabinet picks how he likes them.
What about Chris Christie? What are you picking up on in terms of whether or not he's still involved in this transition?
It's not been a good run for Chris Christie either way you slice it. And his decision to become the first normal Republican, regular Republican, to jump on board with Donald Trump after he bled out Marco Rubio in New Hampshire, the perceived reward, what people thought would take place, was that Christie would be very influential, and people even talked about the Attorney General for Christie. But the reality, of course, is that between the internal friction, and I think that it's not unfair, as some have said, that Chris Christie was the guy who prosecuted Donald Trump's son-in-law's father and put him in jail. Internal frictions multiplied by the fact that the way that the Bridgegate trials have turned out have been very bad for Christie. I just don't know that he has enough to bring and to offer Trump to be worth the hassle.
Yeah. We'll see. Some arguing that he's, still somewhere in that process, but time will tell. Chris Direwalt, thank you very much. Good to see you, sir. So kind of just ahead, Megyn Kelly joins us for more on the Trump transition, the press, and how all of this is playing out. In terms of Donald Trump's relationship with the media, something she knows a lot about. So she will be here coming up.
A lot to talk about there. Looking forward to that. Fox's alert now. We are learning new details this morning that illegal immigrants are set to ask President Obama for a pardon. They want to avoid the possibility of deportation that could involve about 750,000 so-called dreamers protected under an executive order that could be reversed under President-elect Trump. There are mayors in sanctuary cities coast to coast vowing to protect these undocumented residents. And former House Speaker Newt Gingrich has the following suggestion for the third week in January.
This is madness. So my advice to President-elect Trump is pretty simple. One, you should ask your new Attorney General on day one to direct immigration efforts right into the sanctuary cities. Two, you should indicate any mayor who attempts to interpose. And three, you should ask the Congress immediately, as one of its first items, to pass legislation authorizing cutting off all federal aid. Now, let's see how long Chicagoans like the idea that every penny of federal aid to Chicago is cut off.
Well, that's the money. Stephen Dinan, political editor for the Washington Times on the Hill. And Stephen, good morning to you and welcome back here to America's Newsroom. Why don't we start there with Gingrich's point? Go after the money. What do you think about that?
Well, look, there's ironically enough, President Obama's actually already set that up. Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, issued a letter earlier this year saying that they already have the authority to deny some grants, some of the Justice Department grants, to these sanctuary cities. Now, this administration hasn't pulled the trigger on that, but that's a tool sitting there on day one for the next Attorney General to use. And obviously, President-elect Trump has said that he would go after sanctuary cities. So I expect to see something like that very early on. You know, in particular, obviously we'll wait and see who that Attorney General might be, but there are a number of these Republican senators here on Capitol Hill who are being talked about as a potential Attorney General. They've actually already called for the President Obama to use those exact tools. So if they become the Attorney General, they know exactly how to do what Speaker Gingrich was talking about.
Maybe we're getting too far ahead of the story. We don't know what Trump's going to do. I mean, would you expect him to reverse the order that could affect 750,000 people?
Well, that's different. I do expect him to go after sanctuary cities. I think he's been fairly clear about that. He's been less clear about what he will do with, as you referred to them, the dreamers, those 750,000. These are the most sympathetic cases out there. These are the children who, by and large, were brought here by their parents. They had no say in the decision. They're the sympathetic cases. It's unclear to me what a President Trump would do with them. The broader population, I do expect that, he told us this weekend he will begin some deportations. He listed this 3 million number, which is a lot less than the all of them have to go that he said during the campaign. But yeah, I do think, as we said, that's a really tough crew. They are, most of them, those 750,000, they're here on a 2-year permit right now, a renewable 2-year permit. One easy solution for the president would be to say, we're not going to renew it. You can continue to serve out that 2 years, and then we'll see what we do with Congress in the meantime.
Because what his comment was the other night, and I think this is very important, Stephen. He said control the border, and then they'll go after criminal illegal immigrants. That was 1 and 1A in that interview.
Yeah, now it's also worth noting that is essentially what President Obama says he's doing right now. So at least, from the rhetoric, that's the Obama position. We're already going after the criminals. We're deporting, a couple 100,000 of them a year, and he's taken efforts to secure the border. In fact, border crossings, they're up in the last year or two, but they are much lower than they were a decade ago. So President Obama would say he's already done much of that. President-elect Trump says a lot more needs to be done. In some ways, this is all sort of posturing, and the real tough question is what you do at the end of that, what you do about the 8 million who you don't try and deport, what happens to them after you get that border secured.
Stephen, thanks for coming in today. Analysis there from the Hill. Stephen Dinan, thank you, sir, and it's good to see you again. 9 minutes past the hour. So we'll see how many of these executive orders are flipped, right? I mean, it's...
Got a pen and a phone. That goes both ways, right?
So got the ink.
Yeah. We should expect to see a lot of that based on what the president-elect has said. And in the meantime, he is already causing some problems with reporters ditching the press corps last night. What a scene this was in Midtown Manhattan. They decided, let's go in for dinner around the corner. But unfortunately, they didn't know or decided not to alert the press, which feels that they needed to be brought into such decisions. So is that a big deal? Megyn Kelly joins us next on that and more as we talk about her new book and where the Trump relationship with the media may be heading. She'll be here in a moment.
Also, President Obama issuing a warning about division at home and abroad. Is his assessment fair? We'll debate it, fair and balanced, in a moment. Also, this coming up.
Colleges Churches across the country protesting the new president-elect, the movement to make campuses a safe zone for illegal immigrants.
There is this from overseas overnight earlier today. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad making comments about Donald Trump. He says Mr. Trump could be a, quote, natural ally to his regime. Trump has said he's willing to work with Assad in order to defeat ISIS. In an interview, Assad said his government would have to see if the Trump administration is genuine in its effort to go after terrorists. More than 300,000 people in Syria have been killed over a 5.5-year civil war in that country.
So President-elect Donald Trump's transition team is hunkered down at Trump Tower, just a few blocks from here, filling in the organizational chart, or trying to at this point. But Mr. Trump spent part of the morning calling out the New York Times, the newspaper reporting on the transition in disarray. This video I'm going to talk about in just a second here, and what you were seeing from last night. But the Times reported that there were officials from foreign dignitaries calling Trump Tower, you know, sort of like the main number to try to reach him. He fired back on that at Twitter, saying this: the failing at New York Times story is so totally wrong on transition. It is going so smoothly. I have also spoken to many foreign leaders. On another report, he was actually very busy on Twitter this morning. He said, I'm not going to try to get, quote, top-level security clearance for my children. This was a typically false news story, Mr. Trump wrote earlier today. So joining me now, anchor of the Kelly File and the author of the new book, Settle for More, Megyn Kelly. Good to see you.
Hello. Great to be here. I know. This is fun.
So talk to me a little bit about, you know, there's going to be a lot of pushback from the press. We're already seeing it. The White House correspondents, folks saying, and you can roll that video now, about last night he went out for dinner, and they were like, what do you mean? You can't just go out for dinner and not tell us. We're supposed to be let in on these things. So do you see it changing, his relationship with the press? Does he get it?
They say it's going to. I mean, Hope Hicks, his spokesperson, says he's going to behave as a traditional president would when it comes to the press pool. But what that means for the average viewer sitting at home, who probably don't pay that much attention to what the press pool does every day, is they're going to be with him all the time.
All the time.
All the time. It's like having a bunch of stalkers with you at all times. And I think Donald Trump's probably figuring this out. Like, I can't go to the 21 Club with my family without all these guys following me. Like, that's irritating. But that is the deal. And there are important reasons for it. I mean, when President Ronald Reagan got shot back in 1984, it was a press pool photographer who actually caught the moment. And there have been many other moments in U.S. history with, you know, U.S. presidents where big moments involving our president were captured by the press pool. So that's why we have it. It's an important thing. It's important for the First Amendment. It's important for him to know that we're watching. But it's irritating, understandably.
Yeah. And there's a learning curve to understanding what it entails, especially when you haven't worked in politics your whole life, although I'm sure you got a taste of it, no doubt, along the campaign trail.
But the 21 Club is an awesome place, so I understand him just like, I got to go. One more time before I head to Washington.
And it's right around the corner, which is very convenient. In terms of the security clearance issue with the kids, and you know, sort of the next level of that reporting, I think, has to do with Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who has been by his side throughout this whole thing. So, you know, should he receive security clearance if he wants him in those meetings where they're discussing all of this?
Well, it seems like Jared Kushner has become a special kind of advisor to Donald Trump. He's Ivanka's husband, among his many other accomplishments. And he, by all accounts, is you know, to be credited with really playing a major role in getting Donald Trump elected. I think it's up to Donald Trump who he wants to have the security clearances. However, I do think there is a potential problem if you're going to let the kids, his adult kids, continue to run the Trump organization, in which they'd have many international dealings and also receive access to top secret intel. The experts are saying that's a conflict of interest. You just can't allow that. Even Newt Gingrich was saying the other night, going to have to look into that. That we got to slow that one down a bit. But Donald Trump is saying that's not the case now.
You know, in terms of your own interaction with him, do you see a learning curve with that? Do you think that he's understanding that it's different now as president than it is as a candidate in terms of your interactions with the press?
I mean, I hope so. I'm not worried about myself, but in terms of the press in general, yeah, I mean, we need to have a good relationship with him in terms of there can't be constant abuse by a president of any one given reporter, because, I mean, that has First Amendment implications. But he has said through his spokesperson that they're looking to have a clean slate with the press as he goes into office.
But he's already tweeting at the New York Times, you know, the failing New York Times.
He hasn't actually taken office yet, Martha. Let's just give him until January 20th, and then we'll see. I'm of the belief that we should appeal to everybody's best angels, and let's give him the benefit of the doubt until he proves proves that he doesn't warrant it.
Yeah. You know, in terms of your book, there's been a lot of discussion about the book. But, you know, as I was saying to you, I started reading the early chapters last night, and I found it so interesting about your childhood. And I knew, just for example, that you lost your father when you were in high school. But reading about that period for you, first of all, I just can't imagine going through what you went through. And there's other teenagers who've been through that, and they know what that was like. But, you know, how do you think those things impacted you and turned you into the successful woman that you become?
Well, I mean, listen, the book is very revealing. It's very open, and it's a direct conversation between me and the reader and our viewers. And I included chapters like that one, and on the loss of my father, and on the year I had of torment in 7th grade with being badly bullied, and some other tough times in my life, from my divorce to realizing how unhappy I was as a lawyer and coming to understand that I should change my life, because I think everybody's had those challenges. And my own experience, having been on the other side of the TV camera for most of my life, was I think you look at people like you and me and think, oh, they must have it all going on. Like they see us after we get our false eyelashes on, and we have a team of people who put us together, right? And they're like, oh, yeah, she has a great life. And it's like, okay, it's great, but it wasn't always great. And I went through great periods of sadness in my life, and in a way they helped me. I mean, I think too much today we're messaging our kids and our young people that there should be no adversity. There should be no upset in life. And if you're experiencing any, you need to shut that down and get to your safe space. And I'm of exactly the opposite view, that you need to accept that that's part of life and learn how to build a core of muscle to handle it, so you can take a gut punch every once in a while.
Yeah, and that is the lesson, and I think everything you say is so true. And those difficult experiences are what prepare you for the rest of the things that are to come.
Well, and the other thing I write about in the book is sort of breaking into TV from my law days and working my way up the ladder here at Fox News. And a show by the name of America's Newsroom, when some executives paired me with would you pay attention? I'm talking about you now.
I'm listening.
When they paired me with a man named Bill Hemmer, when we launched this show back in 2007, and let me tell you, I was scared witless. And this gentleman over here, he knew. He was an experienced professional. The breaking news would come up, the Fox News alert, and I would go like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. He was so kind. He would always shoot me some copy. He'd give me a couple lines. He never wanted the credit. He just wanted to help me. And all of that's documented along with... This is
not a person I recognize at all.
I'm telling you, because
it's really tense around here.
Yeah, you don't need his help. But it's all documented, and it includes my very favorite episode of television I've ever been involved with, and it was an episode of America's Newsroom that hemorrhaged. Do you have any idea what it was?
It was about unmistakable honesty.
Radical honesty. Radical honesty.
We had somebody tweet to say, how about the cow song? Remember the cow song?
Oh, that's right. That was a great one, too. Anyway, Settle for More. Check it out.
Good luck. Settle for More. It's a great book. Thanks for being here.
Thanks,
we'll see you tonight.
Great.
So the pieces of leadership falling into place now on the Senate side. Moments ago, Mitch McConnell, the Republican from Kentucky, has been reelected. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Democrat from New York, will serve as Minority Leader. This is happening as it is time for, another election, this time in the Senate. Republicans and Democrats holding their leadership elections later today. Not much expected to change on the Republican side. Democrats might have some restructuring to do, and Mike Emanuel's on that live on the Hill. And Mike, tell us about that. Good morning to you.
Bill, good morning. They are sorting that out today. We do expect to hear from the Senate Democrats later. All eyes are watching to see if Washington Senator Patty Murray will challenge Illinois Senator Dick Durbin for the number 2 spot in the Senate Democratic leadership to be the whip. Murray is currently number 4 in the Senate Democratic leadership, so that may be a bit of drama. Meanwhile, we talked about House Republicans and their lack of drama. They're already looking ahead to governing, and this morning a key player in the House Republican leadership was asked about President-elect Trump's tough stance on trade.
I want Congress to consider it on our timetable, because ultimately Congress controls the clock, we control the approval. But I think President Trump is right on target when he says enforcement first, make countries play by the rules in trade. Boy, we are backing him all the way.
And Brady is a key player as chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. They oversee the tax code. They also oversee international trade. So it's likely to be a busy 4 years for his panel. Bill?
Yeah, what's going on with House Democrats? I mean, everything seems to be, I guess, a bit up in the air, Mike. What can you track down?
Bill, no question about that. They were planning to have elections tomorrow for leadership. They bumped that back to November 30th. This morning, Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi is having an election review session for her members to hear their concerns at a time when many House Democrats are clearly frustrated, and all are watching a rising star from Ohio to see if he might challenge Pelosi.
There's a real appetite in the country for a new Democratic Party. Look, the Obamas are gone, the Clintons are gone, the Bidens are gone, Harry Reid's gone, we don't have anyone at the DNC. The House leadership race is really going to be an important signal to many Democrats, independents, and moderate Republicans of what the new Democratic Party looks like.
If Ryan wants to challenge the powerful Nancy Pelosi, he has 2 weeks to convince his colleagues. Pelosi, when asked about the election, is saying it was a problem at the presidential level.
Mike Emanuel, thanks on the Hill. More to come on that, certainly. Maybe today, in fact. Thank you, Mike. Martha, thank you.
So President Obama appearing to throw some shade on President-elect Trump, linking his election to the divisive impulses of the American voter.
Also, students demanding sanctuary on campus as they protest the results of an American election.
Did you notice?
Iraqi forces coming under heavy fire as they push deeper into Mosul. Troops have established a foothold in the east, and they are trying to evacuate families who are trapped with neighbors under siege as ISIS continues its defensive onslaught. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palkot joins us live from Erbil, Iraq. Greg?
Hi, Martha. We are just about a month into this fight to get ISIS out of Mosul, and this fight gets more intense, more complex every day. Today, inside Mosul, Iraq Special Forces meeting stiff resistance from ISIS. Car bombs, mortars, snipers. They're moving into a new militant-held area in the northeastern side of the city. As we found out in a visit to the front line today, war is all around. Take a look.
This is an example of the tenuous nature of this anti-ISIS operation. We are here in the district of Baghjali, just on the eastern edge of Mosul. It's supposed to be free of ISIS, but just in the past couple of minutes, as we've been here, we've been hearing explosions on both sides. We've been seeing Humvees whizzing by, helicopters overhead, and casualties coming out as civilians struggle just to survive.
That road we were on is the main eastern gateway into the fight. Iraqi troops also coming in from the north, south, and west. They're trying to cut off ISIS. By the way, we also saw a good number of U.S. troops, probably Special Force, getting into the fight as well. American boots definitely on the ground here. Finally, we watched as Iraqi forces took one more anti-ISIS measure. They separated out the men, especially fighting age, from women and children fleeing the fighting. They were checking the male IDs against militant databases. We were told by one gentleman that, in fact, they have nabbed a number of bad guys in this way. And as for those civilians just trying to survive, Martha, we talked to a few of them. Their needs are simple: water, food, medicine, electricity. A lot of moving parts in this thing, a lot of suffering. Back to you.
That is for sure. Great reporting. Greg, thank you very much.
President Obama's overseas taking possibly a dig at Donald Trump during his visit in Greece, warning about divisive politics and nationalism. Here is part of what he said today.
I do believe, separate and apart from any particular election or movement, that we are going to have to guard against a rise in a crude sort of nationalism or ethnic identity or tribalism that is built around an us and a them.
Wow. Brant Blakeman served as Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush, and Ebony Williams, political analyst, attorney, and Fox News contributor. You guys hear that? I mean, what are you thinking about that, Brad? I mean, do you think that's a shot here, or is that a shot overseas? Go ahead, sir.
No, it's a shot directly to the president-elect. Look, it's not the president-elect who's fomenting dissent in America, not accepting the election results, of course. It's the organized protests. These aren't organic protests. These are professional protesters who are getting money from outside groups like MoveOn.org and Black Lives Matter and others that are funded in order to foment the kind of rhetoric that this president has said on foreign soil against America. He's done it before. This apology and appeasement and pointing the finger at the problem of America that doesn't exist is dangerous. And the president is fomenting this, using his office overseas. Unprecedented for a president to do that. As a matter of fact, he should be in America trying to smooth the way for a smooth transition and not take a victory tour on failed policy.
Okay, Ebony, what do you think about this argument? Are you agreeing with Brad on that?
Well, Bill, no, I heard it quite differently than Brad. I actually saw the president here, as you said, Bill, in the intro. This was part of what he said. He really was talking about how globalization has very real consequences and immediate impacts to many Americans. And he actually, to me, really talked about how President-elect Trump tapped into that concern when communities see manufacturing jobs moving out of state and all of a sudden their, primary source of income is gone. That's a real thing. And President-elect Trump talked about it and tapped into that fear. And President Obama spoke about that. What he was doing, though, was warning against kind of knee-jerk immediate reactions to get kind of caught up in being concerned about where we stand as Americans in our own country as a result of this fast-moving globalization. Now, you can agree or disagree with that point, but I didn't see it as a dig at all.
How about Brad's point about the protests? I mean, they seem organized and they're in every city. That's about the most public reaction we've seen since the vote.
Many of them are, Bill, and I think we know many of them were bought and paid for. And I'm a criminal lawyer first and foremost, and anybody doing that type of irrational and horrible things, they should be locked up, quite frankly. That's a criminal act.
Brad, Ben Rhodes talked about globalization and technology and trade leading to greater prosperity. He said that on this trip overseas. That was not what was reflected in the vote last week.
It certainly was not.
I mean, up and down the Rust Belt and in the upper Midwest, those people were saying, no, your ideas did not lead to greater prosperity for us. Now, is Ben Rhodes saying be patient? And if so, a lot of these folks have lost a generation in their communities.
That's right. And elections have consequences, quoting Barack Obama. And if anything, he should be trying to unite our country. We had a full, fair, and free election on November 8th. And the president-elect deserves a president behind him, a lame duck president that he is, to support him, not to drive a wedge and not to be deaf to the election results. The American people want America first. We want to save jobs for America. We understand that we live in a global community, and that's all fine, well and good. We should trade, we should have relations, but not at the expense of American jobs and prosperity.
A crude sort of nationalism or ethnic identity. Go ahead.
I just didn't see it that way as he's talking about. I saw the president talking about Donald Trump is not an ideologue, he's a pragmatist. I saw him talking about how President-elect Trump and Bernie Sanders both again tapped into, you're right, acknowledging the results are the results. The people have spoken. They have a serious problem with understanding where they are.
That would be cool, but if you look at that phrase, it looks like it's a dig at the people who supported Trump.
But he did. If you look at the whole speech, though, Bill, he did say that verbatim. I'm taking that right from the speech that he gave in Greece.
Brad?
Well, look, the president, with a wink and a nod, meets with Donald Trump, says that he's going to do everything in his power, and then he tells MoveOn.org, Black Lives Matter, through his rhetoric and through organization on the Democratic side, to foment dissent. Look, you can't have it both ways. Everybody, this is so transparent what the president and the Democrats are trying to do. They're not accepting the election results, and if this had happened in 2009 to Barack Obama, it would be a much different story. The president-elect deserves the benefit of the doubt and a smooth, fair, and free transition, which means the president needs to step down the rhetoric.
Brad, one question. Did the president not say that America deserves to give President-elect Trump a fair chance and a good faith effort?
Yeah, but then what does he do? He goes overseas and trashes the president-elect.
I didn't hear him trash him.
Come on.
I didn't hear that. No, I'm very serious.
When he was talking about nationalism, he wasn't talking to the people in Greece. He was talking to the people in America.
Except for he said separate and apart from this election. So I think very specifically he was talking about that this is a globalization effect that has been happening pre the election of Donald Trump, and it's important that Americans and Democrats pay attention to it.
A crude sort of nationalism or ethnic identity. Those were his words.
No, he did say that, Bill.
I think
no, you're not. He said that. He absolutely did. He's saying that can sometimes be a knee-jerk reaction. He's talking about Americans.
Who is he talking about?
He's talking about the knee-jerk reaction that some Americans have when they cannot find a clear place for where they exist in their own country anymore. I think that's fair and reasonable.
He's talking about, if anything, a super minority of Americans, not the vast majority.
I don't even penalize people for being concerned about where they are in this country right now.
Tribalism that's built around us and them. To be continued. Thank you, Ebony. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
20 minutes now before the hour.
So we're watching the stream of family members and confidants that are going back and forth. There's Eric Trump arriving this morning. This has, essentially become the transition headquarters for the Trump campaign. There's Senator Jeff Sessions, someone who is considered to be a front runner for perhaps the Department of Defense, other high-level positions. We don't know at this point.
Mr. President, happy birthday to you.
Madison Square Garden?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
I believe so.
That there is a piece of Hollywood history. It could be yours if the price is right. Not the microphone. the iconic dress worn by Marilyn Monroe when she sang that song to President John F. Kennedy. Skin-tight dress hits the auction block too, along with dozens of other pieces of her personal items, right down to her pots and pans. Whoa.
What are they going to get for the pots and pans?
Mom, man, pots and pans, as we like to say. Dress could go for $3 million.
You have to keep it in that box. You can't wear it because they had to sew her into it.
Halloween?
Yeah, but they had
Halloween?
That would be a heck of a Halloween costume,
Look
right?
at me.
You'd be like, don't spill any of those ghoulish drinks on my dress. All right. Well, we can't afford it anyway, so that's okay. So a wave of protests across the country demanding sanctuary campuses to shield students, faculty, and their families under a Trump administration as thousands of people from coast to coast protest the election results. Sterling Beard is editor-in-chief of Campus Reform. We had him here yesterday for about 30 seconds. Then we had to go to breaking news, so he's back again today. Thank you for that, Sterling. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So tell us, what's going on these campuses?
Well, what's going on is a fundamental disregard for the rule of law. Look, you've got these students who are not only protesting the reality in which they live, that is the one in which Donald Trump won the presidency fair and square, they now want to openly defy immigration law by pressuring their universities to become sanctuary campuses. That includes things like denying ICE physical access to campus, budgeting for legal proceedings for illegal immigrant students, staff, and their families. So what you're seeing is people really just disregarding the rule of law. It's horrifying.
So what's the reaction from leadership at these universities, and what universities, which ones are we talking about?
Well, we're talking quite a few. As a matter of fact, we've seen petitions at Harvard, Brown, UConn, University of Wisconsin-Madison. But today there's a scheduled walkout at dozens of universities across the country. So it's really too early to see what the reaction from these administrations is going to be. Just like any other bureaucracy, they're going to be slow to react. But I don't think it's going to be they're going to get any reaction from these administrations. Because keep in mind, if Donald Trump has pledged to crack down on sanctuary cities, there's only one thing in this country more dependent on federal funding than cities themselves, and that's American universities.
Yeah, great point. And here in New York, there was a back and forth between history teachers and English teachers about whether or not they should let kids miss class to go to the Donald Trump protest, right?
Yeah, there absolutely was. As a matter of fact, that wasn't just in New York City. We saw some of those walkouts down here in Washington, D.C. as well. And look, you've got your rights as free speech, even as a high school student, but you're in high school to learn. Let me tell you, I would not have been able to go to one of those protests had I been in high school during them, because my parents would not have given me permission. They would have come down pretty hard on me because I had good parents. So let's see what these kids look like when they get into college, but it's probably not going to be pretty.
Well, you're right. They have the right to protest. They also are supposed to be in school, and if they cut school, they can, hope that they'll have a good story for the future. But the history teachers said, go ahead, be part of this, see what's going on, see what happens when people are exercising their right to protest. And the English teachers said, yeah, but you have a quiz tomorrow. So that's how that worked out.
Exactly.
Sterling, thank you very much. Good to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to get to Jenna Lee right now, 12 minutes away from happening now. We're going to get to Jen in a moment here, and we'll see what they got cooking up. In the meantime, though, I want you to meet an extraordinary human being, an amazing American. This Army Green Beret lost his sight fighting the war in Iraq, but that has not stopped him from doing things most of us would never dream of. Ivan Castro's amazing story is next here on America's Newsroom.
Coming up and happening now, new details on the staffing for the Trump White House. There's a lot of talk about filling those 4,000 positions at the White House. But do you know how many employees are already part of the Trump Organization? We'll tell you top of the hour. Also, we're tracking President Obama as he heads for Berlin, reassuring our allies about the future of NATO. Any headlines, will bring those to you. And also an auction today of the oldest known stone copy of the Ten Commandments. The starting bid, top of the hour.
So he lost his sight in Iraq after a mortar attack while serving there, but that has not stopped the Green Beret you're about to meet. Ivan Castro, and today he's running marathons. He's a champion bicyclist. He even trekked across the Antarctic with Prince Harry. His amazing story, Fighting Blind, a Green Beret story of extraordinary courage, hits bookstores this week. And Ivan Castro, I want to say welcome here to Fox and America's Newsroom. Wow, you look good. Thanks for coming in today. Your wife had a big part of getting you off the couch and back into life again. And what I read is that what you were looking for, and I think this is the great value here, is that you were looking for a way to reclaim his soul, your soul, and your purpose. Can you take our viewers through what that process was?
Absolutely. You know, we all live in a bubble, our daily bubble, and when you're struck with an illness or an injury, you're clueless. And when you're told that you're going to be blind for the rest of your life, I was trying to find what was my next step, because all of my dreams and goals had crumbled. And I came to realize that very quickly through my wife, that I still had men that were deployed and I still had a family, and life was going to continue to move on, and I just had to, you know, pick up the pieces and continue to take that step forward like I did every time before.
Yeah. What year was that? I mean,
that was in September 2nd, 2006, when I was injured in Yusufia, Iraq.
The day. But your wife, when she came in and set you onto the path you are now, what did she tell you?
You know, she told me that when she wheeled me down the hospital ward, and there were parents and other injured service members that looked at me, and there were loved ones, wives and